During the last 5 years of his life, my friend and mentor, Gary Mangiacopra, sent me the occasional manila envelope in the mail, filled with all sorts of amazing stories from his personal files, around which my new series, Secrets from the Archive, revolves. Gary knew that my chief interest was in Canadian history and mysteries, and so the files he sent me were usually on stories set in the Great White North. Very often, however, Gary's packages also contained an assortment of stories from the United States, which he considered particularly interesting. 3 years ago, I had the idea of drawing from those American stories to make videos for a separate YouTube channel, as I wanted to keep this one dedicated to stories from Canada. I still intend to make Canadian stories the focus of this channel, and I'm currently working on 2 research-hungry videos on historical Canadian mysteries, in addition to countless others which I have simmering on the back burner. However, Secrets of the Archive has opened my eyes to the possibility of releasing short but fascinating stories from around the world, which I hope will appeal to your sense of curiosity, and which I hope will keep this channel afloat in the interims between the releases of these massive Canadian projects I've been working on. With that in mind, I'm very happy to finally share with you this old video on obscure American mysteries from the Midwest and New England. Enjoy. Several of these stories deal with a rash of mysterious events which took place in the United States in the year 1973. Perhaps the best introduction to this spate of unusual happenings is an article in the November 1973 issue of a newsletter written by the late Fortean expert John A. Keel, entitled 1973, A Great Fortean Year. Everything is happening at once, the article began. A major UFO flap began in February and is still continuing. Monsters and ASS, or abominable swamp slobs, have appeared in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and Enfield, Illinois. The Enfield critter had 3 legs, which figures, since the chief witness was a crippled war veteran named McDaniel. The Enfield critter to which Keel referred was but one of a series of similar-looking animals to be spotted throughout the Midwestern United States throughout the 20th century, which John Keel, Loren Coleman, and other cryptozoologists have dubbed the devil monkey. Another of Mr. Mangiacopra's articles, written by an unnamed staff writer and published in the June 12, 1973 issue of Washington, D.C.'s Star News, deals with that very critter. The article describes how 25-year-old Loren Coleman, then an anthropology and zoology student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, intended to investigate sightings of an ape-like creature, alleged to have taken place in Enfield, Illinois, in late April and early May of that year. Coleman, the article contends, who has said he has been collecting data on such sightings for 10 years, said he believes the creature may be a type of anthropoid ape. One sighting of the so-called Enfield monster was reported by one Rick Rainbow, whom the article described as a news director at radio station WWKI, Kokomo, Indiana. While working with 3 companions on some undisclosed project in a rural area about a half-mile north of Enfield, Rainbow allegedly recorded strange elephant-like animal calls on an audio recorder. Coleman, who listened to the tape, likened the sound to one of the calls made by the siamang, a black-furred gibbon native to the jungles of Southeast Asia. The strange calls were allegedly made by a monkey-like creature, which Rainbow and his companions found skulking in an abandoned barn north of town. The men described the creature as standing 5 to 5.5 feet in height and being gray-black in color. When it learned that it had been spotted, the animal uttered a screech and fled. Rainbow and company were not the first to witness the monster of Enfield, Illinois. At about 9:30 p.m., on the night of April 25, 1973, a disabled soldier named Henry McDaniel, the crippled war veteran to which Keel referred, suffered an unusual experience, which Coleman detailed in his 1983 book, Mysterious America. That night, McDaniel and his wife returned to their home in the northwest part of town to find their children, Henry and Lil, in a panic, claiming that some animal had been scratching at the front door. Seizing a flashlight and a .22 caliber pistol, McDaniel headed back outside and found an unusual creature lurking in the shadows of his property. It had 3 legs on it, Coleman quoted the veteran as having said, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall and was grayish colored. McDaniel fired at the creature and was sure his bullet hit its mark. The creature let out a hiss, which the veteran likened to that of a wildcat, and fled into the darkness. Another article in Mr. Mangiacopra's archive, written by one Tony House, which appears to be from the same issue of the Star News, described another strange creature spotted in Carroll County, Maryland, which local residents referred to as a snallygaster. Whatever it is, House wrote, the residents of Skysville, near the Howard County line, are plenty upset about a creature a number of them have described as between 7 and 10 feet tall, thin of build, with long graying brown hair and big feet. Snallygaster, the article explains, is defined by Webster's Third New International Dictionary as a mythical nocturnal creature, half bird and half reptile, chiefly reported in rural Maryland, which preys on children and poultry. As a further clue to the monster's origins, the Snallygaster, the dictionary says, is a corruption of the German word Schnellgeister, meaning quick spirits. Not too surprising for a country bordering on Pennsylvania Dutch country, and also settled by Germans. The article goes on to describe how sightings of such creatures were reported regularly in the 1930s, the subject often being described as a hairy animal with a big bushy tail and black hair, which stood about 6 feet tall, and left tracks measuring 13.5 inches long and nearly 6 inches wide. Sightings of snallygasters and devil monkeys were not the only strange reports to grace the pages of 1973 newspapers. According to Keel, well-financed and well-equipped expeditions had been launched in America's Pacific Northwest in search of the Sasquatch, in Scotland's Loch Ness in search of its famous elusive denizen, in the waters of the Atlantic in search of the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle and evidence of the lost city of Atlantis, respectively, and in caves at the edge of the White Sands Missile Range in the deserts of New Mexico in search of a legendary Aztec treasure. Finally, Keel concluded, the sun has been misbehaving this year. Unusual magnetic conditions prevail, probably accounting for some of the strange things that have been happening. Both the US and USSR have quietly sent a number of rocket probes to the sun to find out if it's planning to blow up on us this year. If not, there is a major comet which will bypass Earth this December and put on a sky spectacular. Maybe even kill us all. It's going to be a great year. One final collection of articles from Mr. Mangiacopra's archives describe a spate of mysterious disappearances to take place in both southern Illinois and southern Missouri in 1973, the former not far from sightings of the Enfield monster. Ranches throughout the area reported that dozens of their cattle had inexplicably vanished. Many victims blamed the disappearances on a mysterious unmarked U.S. Army transport helicopter, which had been seen hovering in the area, theorizing that those aboard the craft shot their animals with tranquilizers, hooked them up to cables, and hoisted them aboard. A farmer from Balcom, Illinois, named Edwin Peters, allegedly saw the helicopter hovering over his cattle herd. His wife described the craft as being very quiet, and suspected that its engine was muffled by some device. Mr. Peters seized his shotgun and fired 2 warning shots above the helicopter. When some of his buckshot unintentionally fell on the craft, taking out one of its lights, the suspected cattle rustlers beat a hasty retreat across the prairie sky. Other strange events of 1973, alluded to in Mr. Mangiacopra's archives, include the apparent theft of a barn in Utah, the apparent theft of an entire house in Nehan, Wisconsin, and the falling of mysterious light brown snow with red hues in northeastern Bulgaria, which meteorologists were at a loss to explain. For millennia, lone travelers the world over have returned from their excursions with tales of strange flickering lights they encountered in the wilderness at night. Those who attempted to follow these mysterious nocturnal candles found themselves drawn off the beaten path into wild and hazardous country, only to watch their phantasmal quarry vanish into the darkness, leaving them lost and alone. In the English-speaking world, these phantom lights are perhaps best known by the names Wills-o'-the-Wisp, Other appellatives include Ignes Fatui, literally fool fires in Latin, and Jacks of the Lantern. Different folkloric traditions blame will-o'-the-wisp on different causal agents. To the Celts of Western Europe and the British Isles, they were the candles of mischievous fairies, who took great pleasure in luring human travelers into hazardous territory. Anglo-Saxon tradition contends that they are lanterns, carried by lost souls, condemned to wander the earth until Judgment Day, as punishment for misdeeds they committed in life. Since at least the 18th century, scientists have proposed all manner of theories which purport to provide rational explanations for the will-o'-the-wisp phenomenon. Some scientists, observing that mysterious flickering lights are often reported over wetlands, have suggested that they are the flames of certain gases which regularly leak from swamps and bogs, which automatically combust when exposed to oxygen. Others have ascribed fool fires to the activity of ball lightning, a globe of what is suspected to be ionized plasma, believed to form very infrequently during thunderstorms. Others still contend that will-o'-the-wisp are clouds of bioluminescent organisms, like foxfire fungi or fireflies. Although these scientific explanations doubtless account for many sightings of mysterious lights in the wilderness, they cannot explain Ignes Fatui, which regularly appear in locations devoid of both wetlands and bioluminescent organisms. One such fool fire, which defies rational explanation, once appeared with casual frequency in a forest in southern Indiana, outside a rural homestead. A detailed description of this will-o'-the-wisp appeared in an article in the February 1953 issue of the magazine Fate, written by Mrs. Carrie E. Sackrider of Meadow Vista, California. Mrs. Sackrider began her story by describing how her paternal grandparents once owned the aforementioned homestead in southern Indiana. When her father married her mother, who was then very young and hailed from a different part of the country, he took her home to live with him and his parents on the homestead. Desperate to get out from under the noses of her in-laws and make a home of her own, Mrs. Sackrider's mother begged her husband to clean out an old log shack on the property, which was employed as a tool shed, so that she could convert it into their own tiny home. Her husband did as requested, and in no time, Mrs. Sackrider's mother transformed the one-room log hut into a cozy cottage. No mansion could ever outshine the old log house in Mother's eyes, Mrs. Sackrider wrote. It was hers, and hers alone. Who had built the house, its history, I do not know. For many years, this log cabin served as her family's home. Mrs. Sackrider herself was even born inside the cabin in 1889. About a quarter-mile from the cabin, an old rail fence ran along the border of the property, extending from the edge of a nearby forest to another fence which ran along the edge of the highway. A gate in the fence lay in line with the cabin's front door. Occasionally, but at no particular time, Mrs. Sackrider wrote, a light would appear from the direction of the woods, follow the fence to the highway fence, turn and follow that to our front gate, then disappeared. It seemed it had done that for many years. No one was afraid or alarmed. No one had ever seen it start. It was always in progress when someone would call, "There's the light." They would watch it and wonder. Nothing could ever be found to explain it. It traveled about as fast as a man could walk, with the movement of a torch carried over his shoulder. Some may say it was a will-o'-the-wisp, caused by dampness, or whatever causes will-o'-the-wisps. But this was along a plowed field. And why did it always follow the fence? Why did it never once return after the old house was torn down? If it had been a will-o'-the-wisp, foxfire, or anything of the sort, tearing down the house would not have stopped it. To date, I've never heard an explanation of the light.